So, David Gristina of Krav Maga New York. I know you're a black belt, and today I'm wearing a black belt. Anyhow, so I know what you could do to me if I called you stupid, but what would you say to me if I was so stupid as to call you stupid?
Well, Bruce, did you just call me stupid?
I think I did.
Are you calling me stupid because I'm sitting next to Mike? What if I were sitting next to you? Would I still be stupid then?
Duh. Anyhow, what you just saw, David Gristina graciously cooperating with me on, is called verbal judo, and we're going to be hearing a lot more about that and about self-defense and bullying and how it could help prevent kids from getting involved in drugs on today's show. And I'm Bruce Apar, and you're watching Hudson Valley WXYZ with Bruce the Blog. Hudson Valley WXYZ with Bruce the Blog is a weekly TV program where we bring you people making unique contributions to our quality of life, and that's certainly true on today's show with our three guests. And we also like to explore ideas and issues and topics that are important to all of us who live here, and I thank Chase Media Group and its CEO Carla Chase and Chief Strategy Officer Frank Ridge for producing the show, which you can also find, by the way, on YouTube. If you search for Hudson Valley WXYZ or Bruce the Blog, and you'll find all the old shows as well. So let me introduce also our other two guests, in addition to David Gristina of Krav Maga New York, who you met at the outset in our little playlet that he was happy, well, I don't know if he was happy, I was happy that he cooperated with me on to demonstrate one of the things we are going to be talking about today. And I have two guests returning who were here very recently, actually, I think in June, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yep.
And I guess we're going to start with Tom Diana, who is actually a Yorktown councilman, sitting on your left on the TV screen. I have to get that right? It's not the way we're sitting.
That's right.
Tom is a councilman in the town of Yorktown, and he is also the chair of Yorktown Citizens Task Force Against Heroin, which is what we talked about last time when you were on the show, with our friend Mike Reda, who is the co-chair of Yorktown Citizens Task Force Against Heroin. Thanks, Mike, David, and Tom.
Thank you, Bruce.
For being here today.
Thank you for having us, Bruce.
And so last time we talked a lot about the task force and how you started it and how it's been really growing very quickly. You have your monthly meetings at the Elks Club, and then several weeks ago, I guess it was late July, right, you added a new feature, so to speak, at least for a limited time, which is the self-defense free courses that David has been giving at the Elks Club. Mm-hmm. And I know I was at the first one, I think it was July 20th. It's Monday nights at 7 p.m., right, for about an hour. And again, these for now are free. There's how many there's 4 or 5 of them?
Four.
Right.
Four.
Right, so the last one will be August 10th, right. And I know when I was there, it was a very nice turnout, and you said that since then it's been growing, right, every time, right? So
Yeah, we've basically went from about 20 kids and adults to a little bit over 50 in the 3 weeks now that we've had it, and it's been a great turnout. We decided not to have meetings, and actually let's have something for the kids to do one night a week.
Right.
If it gives them a little bit of inspiration, a little bit of instruction, and a little bit of just getting out there and moving around, it's a good thing.
Right. No, and when I was there, it was great because, David, you take the kids through some very basic moves, right? Some exercises which are fun with their parents.
That's right. I think that's a fun part, doing it with the parents.
Right, and from what I saw, everybody was really into it. They were very enthusiastic about it. And and I saw some parents really learning along with their kids, because they didn't know how to do this either,
Sure,
right?
sure.
So what is that about? When you start doing the beginning and you take them through those, it's sort of like calisthenics in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, we treat it as a warm-up, but it's a
Right.
fun way to warm up because you're doing it with your child. And there's modifications, of course, for the adults if they don't want to do the sit-ups, if they don't want to do the squats. And I demonstrate that, and I have a lot of fun demonstrating it because I'm there with my own daughter, and I have her doing the exercises, and I just sit there and, But it's a great way to get the blood flowing. It's a great way to start. I prefer not to start by just talking, and I want to get them moving. I want to get them
Right.
active right away. So it's a great way to start, and it's a great way to get the parents and the kids to work together.
Right. Well, let's also talk, David, a little bit about you and your background and expertise, and so you have Krav Maga New York studios in Somers and Middletown.
That's
right?
correct.
2 of them. And how long have you been involved in martial arts yourself?
It's almost 20 years. Next year will be 20 years, yeah.
And you also practiced it in Israel as well. Right?
Yes, I've been to Israel and I've trained out there, yes.
Right, but that's what it is, an Israeli discipline.
It's an
right?
Israeli system of self-defense, yes, that's
Right.
correct.
And what attracted you to it? What was it about it?
It was, honestly, it was by mistake. I was involved in traditional martial arts, and then at one point the instructor that I was learning from began to teach Krav Maga. I didn't know what Krav Maga was, but I had been with that instructor for so long, I thought, okay, well, I'll try it. And I fell in love with it because I saw the difference between Krav Maga as a system of self-defense versus what I had been learning, and I saw the simplicity of it and the power of it, and so I continued with Krav Maga.
And very basically, I mean, what is the difference really?
Krav Maga is a system of self-defense that is very modern and focuses on instinctive responses to common threats. So it was developed in the 1940s and 50s during the formation of the Israeli state. So it's relatively modern compared to other forms of martial arts that are hundreds of years old, maybe thousands of years old.
Right.
So it tends to be for modern day threats, modern day warfare, modern day police work. It's common every day.
Right, and they use it in the Israeli army.
That's correct.
Yeah. And Mike, I know you have 2 young boys, right?
Yes.
And one of them, the older one, started taking classes from David. Isn't that how you got to know him?
Correct.
So what did you find appealing about it for your sons?
Dave said the word, and it's simplicity.
Right.
I visited a few different places, and I found David's studio to immediately capture the interest of not only the parent but the child. And that to me was important. And what he's teaching is not only the self-defense, but he's teaching the qualities and ways of dealing with the bullying and the peer pressure and the self-confidence, which goes into the whole thing that Tom and I are trying to do, is have them have those qualities that maybe when they're older they can utilize them and say no to drugs.
Right, so the way that what David does and what the task force mission is comes together is because what you're saying is you're tying as it says in your flyer, combating bullying and peer pressure, which of course peer pressure is what often leads into drug use, drug addiction, God forbid. And the other things that you both are referring to is building self-respect and discipline. And I guess back to the verbal judo, David, is what you say on the flyer, verbal redirection, which is what you were doing, right, to me, right at the beginning.
That's right.
Is sort of deflecting the
That's right.
aggression.
That's right. And the example that, when we started off the program, I used what we call a crowd redirection. So using the crowd, I used Mike. But there's other ways of doing it. There's ways that you can be funny, you can be more serious about it, you can be apologetic. All of them play a role in the redirection. And it all depends on the situation and what is in that moment, what you feel is maybe makes more sense. Maybe sometimes it's being funny, maybe sometimes it's using the crowd. Sometimes you can't do either of those. You have to be more serious about the way that you redirect. But yeah, it's a way to redirect abusive language and abusive behavior.
Right. And so it's what's really fascinating about that is, so we're not talking just about physical reflexes, we're talking about mental reflexes, right?
That's
you have
correct.
to really think quickly on your feet.
That's correct.
In order to do that. And so is that an inherent part of Krav Maga, or is that something that you personally have brought to it?
No, Krav Maga is a system of self-defense. It cares about defending ourselves against violent encounters.
Right.
I've been involved in martial arts for many years, 20 years as I mentioned.
Right.
One of the things that began to bother me about martial arts in general, Krav Maga also, is that we learn how to defend ourselves. That's great, but we don't really learn when and why. And we don't know, and perhaps we don't know how to deal with other aspects of everyday life. In everyday life, the likelihood of us being attacked is minimal compared to maybe, kids in a playground using abusive words, or even us as adults in the workplace having to deal with a problematic boss or supervisor. Those kinds of issues we deal with all the time. The violent issue, not as much. It's great preparation for that eventuality because it has great benefits. It enhances, the individual mentally, physically, spiritually. But the verbal is what we really need. Communication. How do we communicate? How do we de-escalate? How do we deflect? And how do we resolve conflict in a way where we don't have to punch the person out?
Right. So that should be the last resort, not
Absolutely.
the first resort.
Absolutely.
Right. By the way, have you ever been yourself in a real life situation involved in a physical altercation?
Fortunately not.
That's great.
At least not since, I guess when I was younger, but I wasn't involved in martial arts then, okay? But since I've been involved in martial arts, fortunately not. I've come close a few times, or at least it seems to me that I've come close, but in every instance, I was fortunate enough that my would-be attacker backed down.
Oh, okay. Did you use what we were talking about, verbal redirection?
I don't quite remember because it was in the heat of the moment, but I can tell you that at some point in time they just noticed I was serious about what I was saying, and de-escalated.
They took you at your word, so to speak.
Right.
And so, Tom, as an elected official, I know that you talk to your peers or counterparts in other towns, and with the self-defense classes, it seems that what Yorktown is doing, what your task force is doing, has inspired other people. In other towns, I'm saying, in other communities, and so now it's beginning to spread.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because we have really made a great relationship with Drug Crisis in Your Backyard.
Right.
They've been great supporters of ours.
And that's the couple.
Yes. Yep.
What's their name? Is the
Stephen and Sue.
Right.
Solomon.
Solomon, and they're wonderful people, and if they're not having something they have to go to, they come to our stuff, and they become really great supporters and friends. We've also got the town of Lewisboro, who started its program.
Oh, they did. Okay.
And the town of Carmel sent a representative down on Monday night, and it appears that they're also showing a great amount of interest in getting this going. Where it's teaching the kids life qualities, and respect and some discipline, which we all need.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
So it's growing nicely. Our meetings have grown, but this was something. It's the heat of the summer. People are away on vacation. Nobody wants to go to a meeting. But if you can go and have a little bit of fun and learn something and interact with other people and even your parents. Like I got a kick the other night when they were elbow slapping their mom and dads, and it was kind of neat to watch because the parents are getting as big a kick out of it as were the kids.
Sure. Right. Well, it's great bonding. It's
a
great bonding experience. Yeah. And then also, I think you mentioned again, we're not committing any towns to this. We're just, but you also we're talking to people in Peekskill, in fact.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. Talked to Peekskill, and I actually talked to somebody in the town of Cortland, and they're going to get back to me with for more information.
Right. So let's talk about when you mentioned the life qualities and the whole way that you try to sort of attack bullying. The I don't know if it's an epidemic. I would hate to think it's an epidemic, but it's out there, and I guess especially in middle school, isn't there a lot of that because they're whatever testosterone in boys is starting to kick in, and they get a little bit cocky and things like that. And So what are some of the principles, David, that you focus on when you're talking to these kids?
So one of the first things that we talk about is what we call the bully cycle. Who's involved in bullying? Who are the players and what role do they play? How does the crowd affect the situation? How does the person of authority, how do they fit into the mix? And the coaches, people like myself, like parents that can help kids, whether it's the target themselves or whether it's somebody in the crowd that comes back home and says, Mom, Dad, today this is what I saw, this is what happened, what should I have done? So we talk about this concept of the bully cycle. And then we move on from there, talk about representation, what it means to represent ourselves in a positive way. And what it means to represent our values. So we talk to the kids about values, and we challenge the kids to try to understand or try to wrestle in their own way, their values, their individual values. They're different for everyone. We want the kids at minimum to start to ask the questions of who they are as individuals and what's important to them. And with that, we build on concepts like what makes a real friend. And generally speaking, I tell the kids, you're gonna, if you analyze your friends, your best friends, you're gonna find that they share your same values.
Right.
Other people that you may know that you say hello to, but maybe you don't associate or consider your best friends, chances are it may be because they have different value sets.
Right.
So we start talking about friendships and what makes a friend and this concept of always representing ourselves in a positive way. But what I say is putting in the plus sign over your head, right? We talk about verbal redirection, some of the things that kids can do if they are called a name or someone is using abusive language towards them, and some redirection that they can also use in case it's happening to someone else that they care about. Okay, we talk about other concepts like the ability to listen, the ability to use empathy, asking questions. You mentioned before, have you ever used verbal self-defense in a situation, a threatening situation? I don't know, because in the heat of the moment I'm not sure, but I can tell you that I use it every day in my daily life, especially at work. If I am dealing with phone calls, anybody who's agitated, whether I'm at work, whether I'm at home, whatever, one of the things that I often do is use my verbal skills to try to rearrange the conversation and try to calm the person down.
Right.
So we talk about redirection, and we talk about principles like safer lines. When are we required, almost morally, ethically, to take action? So we want to make sure that the kids understand that when I say take action, I don't mean physically necessarily, but at least doing something.
Right.
We can't be bystanders when we witness certain situations.
Right.
So we break that down for kids as well. And we talk about ethical intervention, and I usually use the concept of superheroes to convey that message.
Right.
All kids have a favorite superhero, and I talk to them about the difference between, or the powers that the superhero has. I like to use Superman because Superman has certain gifts, but then someone else in the Superman series comes from the same planet and has the same powers as Superman, but they use that power in a bad way. Superman chooses to use it in a good way. So that ties into values and So this is, I gave it to you in a very brief way, but these are some of the different concepts, principles that we hit on in our verbal self-defense lesson. And it's a way that we also, it's a way to build character.
Right. Oh, no, I think it's a great way to do that. And I like the fact you use Superman because he's a journalist.
There you go.
Isn't Clark Kent's a reporter. But it also is true, isn't it, David, that all the things you're saying which are above reproach, there are things that kids should be learning every day, and even in school, I think school maybe teaches them some of that, but not to the extent you're describing. But it's not going to really work effectively unless the parents at home are reinforcing it and basically living it, right?
Absolutely.
It's, so I know parents have been coming to the free self-defense classes, but when you give your classes at your Krav Maga studio, are the parents necessarily there, or?
Some of the parents are there.
Yeah.
The parents enjoy watching their kids.
Right.
I make sure that when we do that session, we do it towards the end of class, I make sure the radio goes off and that I speak nice and loud so
Right.
that the parents can also hear. And I usually see, parents sitting back perhaps during the lesson reading a magazine, but when it's time for that lesson, everybody sits up and everybody's
Oh, really?
peeking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah,
the parents are interested in it, and they are learning it as well.
But I would imagine, by logical extension, if a parent is taking their child to your classes, then the parent is already of that mindset, like you are. Like you were telling me, you were teaching your kids that before they started going to David's classes, right?
I
Courtesy.
taught him about it, and we talked about that last class. But I think what David does that sets him apart from many other places is you're giving them things about values and friendships. And I think one of the things he said in the last class was, you look for people that are like you and better than you.
Right.
And I think that's a lesson that you teach these kids that's not only for self-defense, but it makes them a better person.
Right.
So to get that all combined into one class is what I feel set him apart, and that's why I chose going there.
Yeah, well, I always think of the tennis analogy. They'll say that if you want to become a better tennis player, play somebody that's better than you, right? It's the same type of thing. And also, what's interesting, as a further analogy, is there was a health study that I read about recently that said if somebody has like 2 or more friends that are overweight, the odds are they're going to be overweight too. So it's the same idea, right? That you want to be with people who are going to be good role models, whether it's staying in shape and eating right, or as you're saying, just living a good life. But when I went to the class, David, one of the things I really appreciated a lot, because as a crotchety old guy, curmudgeon sometimes, and I've written about this on my column and my blog, what sometimes upsets me is the lack of civility in society. I mean, sometimes it's more extreme than others, but even on a baseline level, the things that maybe people aren't outright rude, but the things they just don't do either, in being cordial to each other and being, nice to each other. It could just be saying good morning to somebody.
Right.
Yeah. And that was something you were addressing, the courtesy, which I think is, unfortunately, it's almost like a lost art, so to speak.
Right. Yes.
So that's something that you obviously place a lot of value on. Teaching kids as young as possible to be polite and to be respectful.
Sure. And I look at my own life and the things that happen around me, and I wouldn't want my kids to behave that way towards others, and I certainly don't want also the kids that come to my training center to behave that way. So, or any kids that I'm exposed to. So I tend to remind them whenever I have the opportunity, hey, you go to someone's house and you're sleeping over, or you're just there for an hour because you're going to watch a movie together. The first thing you do when you walk in the door, seek out their parents, say hello to their parents, shake their hands, thank them for having you over.
Right.
Don't just walk by the kitchen and peek in and say hi and then keep going. So yes, civility, manners, respect, modesty, being courteous, absolutely.
Do you have any, along those same lines, do you have any thoughts about how a child addresses an adult? Again, things like this tend to change sometimes over maybe even generations. But I remember when I was young, which was quite a long time ago, my father, may rest in peace, would not tolerate us ever addressing an adult by their first name. But then other kids I went to high school with, if I'd go over to their neighborhood or their houses, then they would. So, even within the same era or generation, there were different points of view about whether you say, Mr. Apar, or in my father's case, you say George. But if a child ever called him George, he would not be happy. Yeah. I think that's, again, some people may think it's superficial.
Right.
But it does reflect a certain civility or respect, doesn't it? Yeah.
When the kids are in class, one of the things that we have them do is line up and refer to us as sir or ma'am, depending who's teaching the class. And one of the things that I always tell the kids, I ask them, who looks good when you say that? And once in a while, someone says, you look good, pointing at me. And I remind them, no, I'm not the one that looks good when you say sir. You're the one that looks good when you say sir.
Right.
So, sir, ma'am, that's the way to go until you're told, by an adult. You don't have to call me that anymore. You can call me Mr. David or whatever else, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. I mean, you always see it, obviously, with anybody who's been in the service. you know, it's really nice that they obviously continued to do that, even, you know, when they're back in civilian clothes. You know, we'll always say, you know, sir, or, you know.
And it's noticeable.
Yeah, right, that's what I'm saying. Right. That it's very noticeable, but it's really nice, you know.
Even with the eye contact.
Right, yeah.
David's big on that. When you address someone,
Right.
you don't go, sir. You look at someone and say, sir, how are you? And you give that respect
Right.
to the other person. You look them in the eye and speak to them.
And you know something? It doesn't cost anything.
Right.
It doesn't cost a dime to
Well, you're
be
right. That's
pleasant.
right.
You know, to go up and shake somebody's hand and say, good morning, sir. And most people, when you do that, it'll take them off guard. Matter of fact, you gave a little statement of that. David rides the train every day.
Right.
And, you know, most people either clickety-clicking on their computers or on their phones or
Yes,
whatever the case
right.
might be.
Sleeping.
Sleeping.
Right.
And when the conductor comes and goes, tickets, please, and you go, good morning, sir. He's like, oh, this is it's like, oh, this guy's awake.
Did you have too much coffee?
You know, but it's noticed.
Right.
And then the other people in the train will be like, that was pretty good.
Right, yeah.
You know?
That's true, yeah.
I'll tell you, our experience with David has been wonderful. And you know, I'm probably out of turn here a little bit, but I got to thank the Elks for letting us have it.
Oh,
there.
no, absolutely.
You know, without that venue, to have this type of training
Right.
for the kids, and the use of his mats,
Right.
and so on and so forth, it's been absolutely wonderful. And I can't give enough credit to my right hand.
Right.
I mean, he's been there from the beginning with me, and he has never left my side, sometimes calling me 7 and 8 times a day, what do you think of this? But that's what I got to have.
Right,
you know?
absolutely, yeah.
And he set this up, and this has worked out beautiful, and I applaud you, Mike, for this. This is wonderful.
No, it's a great thing.
Yeah.
You know, and again, which is evidence, as we talked about a little bit, that other towns are now looking at it saying, wait a minute, we should be doing this too. And I mean, is there the possibility it's going to create some kind of a, I don't know, network or a county, like you were talking about, maybe a northern Westchester?
Well, that's what we were
system?
talking about,
Yeah.
looking at the northern region of Westchester County, and Tom and I felt that the more people we had and the more towns and villages that got involved, the stronger we would be to combat this.
Well, right.
And we've gotten such great positive response from different communities that are either in the process of starting or want to start it or coming to our events just to see what we're doing.
So are they talking about forming a citizens task force, that type of thing?
Same concept.
Same concept. They want to use our
Logo,
our moniker, our mission statement.
Oh,
really?
The whole 9 yards,
Right.
which we think is great.
Yeah.
You know, because then we're one. You know, as many different groups cannot do as good a job as one large group.
Of course, yeah.
So hopefully we can funnel this down and really make an impact on this epidemic. And
Right.
that's what it is. It's
Yeah.
an epidemic, and stated by the CDC, Center for Disease Control.
Disease control, right.
And it's
And we should also mention, as we did last time when we had both of you on the show, that our state senator, Terrence Murphy, obviously is a big catalyst in all this, right?
Yes,
I mean,
he is.
He's fully behind it. I know he's proposed and passed legislation.
He's
right?
passed a lot of
Passed
legislation.
legislation to help with this whole fight, you know, against drug addiction and heroin and everything else.
in the town of Yorktown also. Michael Grace, the supervisor,
Yes,
is behind
Michael,
us
yeah.
110%.
Right.
Greg Bernard,
The other councilman.
with me.
Gary Raniola has been very
Judge
big with us.
Raniola.
Judge
yeah.
Raniolo and
Right.
Judge Lagonia.
Lagonia, yeah.
And Chief McMahon, they've all been on board with this.
Right.
And I know I'm probably forgetting somebody, but it's
Yeah.
the outpouring of help from the board level and from the people on the outside, just
Yeah,
like
like David, yeah, right, it's
is
great,
wonderful.
yeah.
And it shows the support that's out there for this epidemic.
Yeah, no. So anyhow, thanks to all of you for being on. I think it's a really important topic we've been discussing, and you know, I hope a lot of people listen more closely and teach their kids, whether they take them to see you or even in their own home, teach them, you know, some of the life qualities we've been talking about. So I want to thank Tom Diana, who's the chair of the Yorktown Citizens Task Force Against Heroin, and his co-chair Mike Reda, and David Gristina of Krav Maga New York for being our guests. And thank you for watching Hudson Valley WXYZ with Bruce the Blog. And remember, when Bruce the Blog listens, people talk. Thank you.
No.
No,
You know what? To be honest with you,
No,
Dave,
not at all. It was very good.
We already did this, and the fact that you're the
Yeah.
master behind it was good that you did